This is my long time coming very first ranking video. Yeah, I've been wanting to do one of these for a while. They seem like a lot of fun to do. And so today I'm going to be doing a Castlevania ranking for non-spinoffs of the original timeline. So no Lords of Shadow, no like spin-off games. I guess there's really only like maybe one or two that I would factor in, which would be Order of Shadows. Probably I would fit in there somewhere, but I didn't add that one to this. Kid Dracula is not included. I did, however, include the remakes. So any game that had like a remake, I don't consider that a spin-off. I consider it a remake of an original game. So we're including that as well. There's one that I didn't include the original of, which was Castlevania Chronicles, also known as Sharp X68000 or Akamajo Dracula X68000. I figured, you know what? I'm just going to go with Castlevania Chronicles because it's basically the almost exact same game. It's just a port of the game, just easier. Who has a Sharp X68000 to play these on? I mean, I have the game, but I don't have a computer system. So I figured, you know what? I'll just go with the easier, more accessible version of the game. So let's do it. We're going to go from, honestly, the order that is present on the screen here. So we're going to start with Castlevania The Adventure. This is the very first Game Boy game that came out for the series. And understandably so, a lot of people really dislike it. They think it's too slow. I never really had a problem with the speed. I think it's a pretty fun game, but it's definitely not on the top of my list of games to play. One of the biggest issues that I have with the handheld Game Boy games for the first two games is that when you get hit, you lose your power-up pretty much immediately. So if you have a powered-up weapon, you get hit, it's pretty difficult to get through. So I'm going to rank this one D. I think this one is not so great. It's okay. It's fun to play. But, it's slow. But the anniversary port of it is actually a lot faster. So if we're talking about that version of the game, I'd maybe bump it up to a C. But yeah, it's a D for that one. However, Adventure Rebirth is a very good game. We're going to give that one a B. Could it be better? Sure. Does it make a lot of improvements on the original? Yeah. It's a really fun game with amazing music, really good soundtrack by, I think it's Manabu Nomiki, who loves to throw in those synth hits, those orchestral synth hits, the Konami synth hits. Those are so good. So great game, great soundtrack, really fun to play. Nice and quick, but also really good challenge. Like, it's a great game. Aria of Sorrow, the Sorrow games. I don't know, guys. I'm not too big of a fan of the Sorrow games. It's not that they're not well made or they're bad. They're just too out there for me in terms of Castlevania. I am a Classicvania fan first and foremost. The more Igavania era, Symphony of the Night onwards, I'm less of a fan of. It's not bad. It's not 100% something I go to. So Aria, I don't have a ton of experience with it, but from the amount that I have played of the game, it just doesn't really do much for me. So it's got a pretty good soundtrack, but overall it's gonna be, I'd say, a C. It's well made, but it's just not for me. Bloodlines is a great game. Really awesome. It's got a phenomenal soundtrack. It's got great gameplay. The controls are great on it. It's so good. So Bloodlines, I'm giving an A. It's great. No complaints whatsoever on that one. Castlevania 64, okay. I know I just did this huge video on it and praised it nonstop, and it is really good. I love the game. It's so much fun to play, but it does have its share of problems. Is it a perfect game? No. Is it a fun game? Yeah, it's awesome. I'm gonna give it, I don't know. I think I'm gonna give it, I'm trying to be really fair to everything and go based on my tastes and what I know, but also not just be like blinded by nostalgia in a lot of ways. But I know there's some games on this list that people are going to be like, yeah, okay, all right, sure. So let's go with A. I don't know. I really love the game. It's great. Castlevania 1, S. Great game. Fantastic. Simon Belmont's first adventure for the franchise, the very first game. How could you not rate this an S? It is the game that set the standard for what Castlevania should be. It's a phenomenal title. The gameplay is fantastic. The aesthetic of the B-movie, like Japanese take on on the horror tropes and B-movie-esque ideals is just great. It's such a phenomenal release, and I can't get enough of it. Castlevania Chronicles, which was the Akamajo Dracula X68000 we talked about before. This was the Sharp X68000 version of the original Castlevania. But in all honesty, this game has just so much uniqueness to it. It really just feels like a retelling or a remake of the first Castlevania, just for the Sharp X68000. If you're a Genesis fan, to me, I've always likened this to this game being basically like, what if Konami remade Castlevania 1 on the Genesis in a lot of ways. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, the Sharp X68000 is so much more powerful, blah, blah, blah. Sure, but that's not what I'm getting at. In terms of the sound chip, the Yamaha sound chip, the style and visuals of it, it just feels like a Genesis game in a lot of ways. So it's a great game. I am going to give this one an A. Okay. Curse of Darkness. I really enjoyed Curse of Darkness. Is it perfect? No, but it's a lot of fun. It's got a fantastic soundtrack. The controls are nice and tight. It's got some stuff in it story-wise that I'm kind of meh on, but overall I really do like it. I went ahead and marked that as a B. I think that's great. Castlevania Circle of the Moon. This is such a fun game, and it gets a lot of hate, and I don't know why. I really like the card system in it, but I also think about it in terms of when the game was released. Like, yes, if you look at the game purely from a Game Boy Advance perspective, it's kind of lower on the list. But if you look at it from like an anniversary collection, the Advance collection that came out perspective, it's great. Visually it stands up. It's like you could actually see the game, whereas when the game first came out, you really couldn't see it. It was very difficult to play because the screen was so dark. So I kind of look at it in terms of that as well. But I think Circle of the Moon is a lot of fun. Is it as good as, some of the top tier games? No. But is it fun? Yeah. I'm gonna give it's pretty average for a Castlevania game, but it's fun. I give it a C. I think it's good. Belmont's Revenge is a fantastic entry in the franchise, but it does also suffer from a little bit of what happened with Castlevania The Adventure. It's just not as tight as it needs to be. Now, it's got a great soundtrack for sure, but it's just, I think the slowness of it kind of brings it down a bit. But I really enjoyed Belmont's Revenge, more so than to me, it's the best of the trilogy by far. So, I don't know, guys. I'm going to give it a B. I think it's pretty solid, rock solid. Simon's Quest. It's hard because I have such nostalgia for this game. Is it a perfect game? No. Is it my favorite? Yeah, absolutely. Do I think that it deserves a high spot in this list? Yes. Yes, I do. Simon's Quest is great. It is the game that was the blueprints for Symphony of the Night. So as much as you want to talk about Metroid and this and that, Simon's Quest 100% set the standard for what a Castlevania game could be in the Igavania era. So yeah, I gotta give it up to that. And likewise with Dracula's Curse, I'm also giving it an S. It also set a standard for games as far as branching paths, different characters, like repeated playthroughs. This game had such great replay value, along with Simon's Quest too, because you had multiple endings. So Dracula's Curse, these top three games, the first three in the trilogy are just untouchable. They're so good in their own ways, and they're so different from each other that they just all really stand out and deserve to be in that top tier. Dawn of Sorrow, pretty much the same as Area of Sorrow. However, it adds in some gimmicks that I'm not too big of a fan of on the DS. I like it in some aspects, but not a fan of it on the DS. So, I don't know. This could be the first one that people are going to be like, no, I totally disagree with you. But I'm giving it a D. It's not a bad game. It's well made, but it is not on my top go-to list of games to play. Dracula X Chronicles and Dracula X are back-to-back here, and I don't know. I know a lot of people are going to be like, you know, oh, you put Dawn of Sorrow so low on the list. How could you? Well, this is my list, personally. So if you don't like it, sorry, but this is my list. So we're going to go as far as Dracula X goes. So this is a remake of Rondo of Blood, the original release. And it's also got the PS1 version of Symphony of the Night, but they redid the translation, so I guess you could call it the PSP version of Symphony of the Night on there. It's cool that you have Symphony on there as a port. I believe the original version of Rondo is also on there as well. So cool to have that portable. The tiny screen is kind of limiting, but you can blow it up if you've got cables on the screen. Also keep in mind that this release is kind of done away with when you talk about like Castlevania Requiem. So unless you're a big fan of the remade like 2.5D version, or I don't even know, you'd call it, I guess, 3D on a 2D background for the Dracula X Chronicles. That part's really cool. I don't know. It always kind of felt a little loose to me in terms of the controls. Rondo had much tighter controls, whereas Dracula X Chronicles' version of Rondo, the remake, is it's good. It is good. I don't know if it's the best version of the game, though. I'd probably still go with Rondo if I had to. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna give this one a C. So it's not bad. It's pretty solid, but yeah, I'm gonna give it a C. Dracula X is a tough one because, man, I know like it's not nearly as good gameplay wise, but it does have some great music, and it is different enough to me that it feels like more of a side story or retelling of the Rondo game, of the original Rondo game. But does that mean that it's like a rock solid game? No, I'm gonna put it at the same level as Dracula X Chronicles. Now, if I was ranking the soundtracks, we'd have a different story, because I think that Dracula X's versions of some of these songs, especially Divine Bloodlines, is extremely underrated and is better, in fact, in my opinion, than the Rondo version of the game. So now we're going to go to Harmony of Dissonance. This is the second Game Boy Advance game. A lot of people poo-poo on this one regarding the soundtrack, but I've read that there were some limitations that they had to overcome regarding the sound on this. I don't know. I personally really love Harmony of Dissonance. I think it's a great Igavania. I think it's a great Castlevania. I love the fact that it's Simon's grandson. I love the fact that the game just feels tight. I love the controls in this, and I thought it was good. Personally, I'm gonna give it a A. I think it's a really fun one, guys. Castlevania Legends. All right, so it's no secret that I'm a big Sonya fan. I do love me some Sonya Belmont. And, I do really like Legends. I thought it was a fun game, but it's also a very easy game in terms of comparing it with the rest of the games in the franchise. And it's got some pretty good music, but overall, I know that there's loyalists to the more Iga era and the Lament of Innocence and all that in terms of the story, which we'll get into in just a minute. But Legends, I don't know, it's not a bad game at all, in my opinion. I think it's a fun one, but I think it's on par with Belmont's Revenge, so I'm giving it a B. So that's it. Legacy of Darkness. This one's a lot of fun, and it corrects a lot of the problems that Castlevania 64 has. But truth be told, I have not finished this game. So I have played it quite a bit, but I have not finished it. So I'm gonna give it a B in terms of the fact that, one, it's a prequel. Two, it definitely fixes a lot of the stuff that Castlevania 64 did, but at the same time, I think that this game is not on the same level for me, and I think a lot of it has to do with nostalgia, because I only rented this one back in the day. Yeah, I own it now, but I only rented it back in the day. I never owned it, and I didn't have the same affiliation with it. So, I think it's good. I just think that it doesn't have the same level of appreciation for me personally, which again doesn't make it a bad game. None of these games on this list are bad. They're all great, but I'm giving it a B. Now, do I have the potential to change my mind on this in the future? Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think once I finish it, I am going to be working on a review for it. So once I finish it, I'll be able to maybe give some more hindsight in terms of, how I feel about it after the fact. But at this point in time, I think I'm going to give it a B. Now, Castlevania Lament of Innocence. I don't know. I have a lot of problems with this game, personally. It's not a bad game, as I've been saying on this entire list. None of these games are bad games, truly bad. But the issues that I have are mostly with the story on Castlevania Lament of Innocence. I don't like the way that they did the story. I feel like they did Sonya dirty in terms of wiping her out. I know that there's reasons for that. I know that, the canon is broken or whatever. I don't really care. I just, personally, for me, Lament of Innocence has a lot of problems going for it. I think that Curse of Darkness did a better job of differentiating all the levels and all the worlds and everything of the game, whereas Lament of Innocence, every corridor feels very similar, and it just kind of starts rolling into one. The gameplay's fun. It's a fun game, but it has some cookie-cutter problems in terms of the design, the level design and everything. I feel like this was the real first attempt from Koji Igarashi to really bring Castlevania to 3D, and it did okay, but it's definitely not the best of the bunch. So where would I put it? I don't know. I think on this list of what I have here, I'm going to put it down here in the D's. So just my opinion, guys. Order of Ecclesia is fantastic. In my opinion, it is the best Castlevania handheld game. The story and the characters are great, but I think what really sells me is the fact that, one, it's really difficult, and because of that, it makes you want to keep replaying it. I love the glyphs. As far as collecting the glyphs, I thought that was a lot of fun. The soundtrack is incredible. But what I really love is that it kind of harkens back to Simon's Quest, where you get like townspeople that you can meet and talk to and interact with and deal with. And I really love that aspect of the game for me. Order of Ecclesia, I loved it when it came out, and I think it's great. Portrait of Ruin is another phenomenal entry in the franchise. I put it at the same level as Bloodlines, which makes sense because it is a direct sequel to it in a way, just because of the fact that it takes place right after Bloodlines, and some of the characters from Bloodlines are also in Portrait of Ruin. But I love the two characters that you could play as, Jonathan and Charlotte, and you could switch back and forth between them. They're different enough that you can take advantage of the uniqueness of both of them. So Portrait of Ruin is a really good game, and it's got a soundtrack by both Michiru Yamane and Yuzo Koshiro of Streets of Rage and ActRaiser fame. So it's great all around. Rondo is, here's my thing about Rondo. I think Rondo is really good. I do. I think it's a good game. I have not beaten it, but it is still a really good game. Is it as good as people say? I think it's a little overblown, truth be told. I do think it's good, but I don't know. I would personally say it's one that I don't have a deep appreciation for, but I do think it is better than the remakes of it. But yeah, so I'm gonna say I'm gonna give it a B. I think it's a really good game, but I still think personally that that it's on this level in terms of that goes. Super Castlevania 4 is a masterpiece, in my opinion. Simon's Quest and Super Castlevania 4 are my two absolute favorite games in the franchise, the ones that I go back to the most. So this game changed so much about the release of the game that it really just doesn't even feel like a remake. It's so different, and the soundtrack's incredible on it. It's like you listen to the soundtrack on Super Castlevania 4 and it sounds like nothing else on the Super Nintendo. It's so unique and different, and they really did a phenomenal job with Super Castlevania 4. It's just, it is a work of art in my opinion. Castlevania Symphony of the Night, I mean, what's left to say about this one? It's so good. It's a great game. I've played it over and over again. I've only beaten it like maybe 3 times in my lifetime, but it's a lot of fun. I love the characters and the story. I love the over-the-top PlayStation 1 version in terms of the localization, which I just did a video on fairly recently with Jeremy Blaustein, the localizer and translator of it. So go check that out if you haven't seen that already. Symphony of the Night is great. The combat is great. It's a real evolution to the franchise. It's technically responsible for spawning an entire wave of games that indie developers create nowadays. So Castlevania Symphony of the Night, of course, gets an S ranking. I don't know. That's my ranking, guys. I'm curious to know what you guys think about the games that I picked here. Do you feel like there's ones that I missed that I should have added? I tried to avoid spin-offs. Games like Judgment, games like Harmony of Despair, and titles like that. I tried to go with originals and direct remakes. So how'd I do? Let me know down in the comments below. If you disagree with me, it's okay to disagree. We do not have to agree on what our favorite Castlevania games are, but this is my favorite ranking-wise for the franchise. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Keep it constructive, keep it fun, keep it fresh, and I don't know, that's it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again on another video. Peace.